Welcome to the Lindsay Hadley Podcast Show, where weekly I interview some of the world's most inspiring people from business, philanthropy, and entertainment. I love collecting humans, and these are some of my favorites I found along the way. This podcast has been brought to us by Capita Financial Network.
Do you need help with the next steps of your financial plan? Think Capita. Capita is a financial network built around you. They have a team of financial advisors, CPAs, estate attorneys, Medicare providers, and Social Security experts to help you accomplish your financial goals. Call or schedule a complimentary consultation at 801-566-5058 or visit their website at capitafinancialnetwork.com. You can also check out their financial education podcast, The Financial Call, available on Apple, Google, Spotify, and YouTube.
Hi, welcome to the Lindsay Hadley Podcast Show. Today I have a lovely guest that's brand new to me. I love when I get to meet new people. Sometimes I have friends on the show and sometimes they're absolute new introductions. So today I'm pleased to introduce Liz Wiseman. So Liz has an amazing background, both as a writer with literary accomplishments and research, and even a background in higher ed, creating Oracle University, and we're excited to talk with her about her current research and her background. She also dabbles in and supports a lot of advising of executives and personal development and leadership development. So Liz, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's so lovely to have you and get to meet you.
Well, nice to meet you and good to be here.
So Liz, share with me a little bit about your career. You started out the beginning of your career at Oracle Corporation. Can you tell us a little bit about that? And then you worked there until it was 2005. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah, Oracle was a great place to work. It was an amazing place to work. I was lucky. I landed in this rapidly growing, very successful, fast-paced, maverick, gunslinging organization. And it was this place everyone wanted to work. And it was my backup job. I actually didn't really want to work there. It's kind of like a backup school that became a great school. I wanted to get a job teaching leadership. And I applied to this leadership development firm, kind of the premier firm in the US. And they were like, hey, you seem interesting, but if you want to teach leadership, why don't you go get some management experience? Yeah, I'm right out of school. I don't know anything. And I thought it was so short-sighted of them not to understand my passion and, what I was interested in doing. And so I had this opportunity to go work for Oracle. And I thought, maybe I'll get some of that management experience there. And it was one of those things like wish granted and, be careful what you ask for. Because I was a year into my career and just got thrown into management. They're like, hey, we need someone to manage the learning and development function. And I just got thrown into so many jobs and into senior leadership jobs. And I'm finding myself running big organizations. And I feel very much like a child with adult responsibilities. And that was kind of part of working in a really high growth organization. And, every job until my very last one, I was unqualified for. I wouldn't even say underqualified. I would say completely unqualified for. And it was thrilling.
How fun is that? I love your humility. I'm sure you weren't completely unqualified or else you couldn't have kept that job very long.
No, I very much was unqualified. And I remember I had been given this first management job and been put in charge of building a university for the company. I think Microsoft had started their university and, I think Larry Ellison, the other executives wanted a university. I got put in charge of it. I'm 25 years old and I'm just a couple years out of university myself. And so I'm doing this job and I was at a cocktail party, with a bunch of Oracle's customers, and my boss, the VP, introduces me to one of the customers, and he's a proper executive with gray hair and lots of experience, a suit, distinguished, all that. And he said, this is Liz. She's, is the director of our, Oracle University. She runs, all of this worldwide. And the guy literally flinched. He was like, because I'm so young. And Bob, my VP, I remember it was a kind of a quick retort. He's just like, oh yeah, she's really underqualified for this job, but she's smart and doing a great job. And I
Wow.
remember, because so even my boss recognized it, was like, yeah, no, really underqualified here. And I remember saying the only thing I could think of to say, and it wasn't really an embarrassing situation. It was just kind of the truth was being spoken. And I'm like, yeah, but Bob, who wants a job they're qualified for?
That's a great line.
I really felt that way. I'm like, yes, I don't feel qualified for this, but I'm learning. I'm like, I don't want a job I'm qualified for. There'd be nothing to learn. And it's been one of my guiding sort of career ambitions, is just never have a job you're qualified for. And if you're starting to feel qualified, it's time to move on.
That's amazing. And so eventually it sounds like maybe you did feel qualified and did move on, because after leaving Oracle, you founded Wiseman Group, which is essentially a leadership research company, right? That was situated in California, in Silicon Valley. Is that right, Liz?
Yeah. And you're right. I did, I get asked, why did you leave Oracle? And I want to emphasize, at the time I left, Oracle is now like a $30-40 billion company. We're in this very acquisitive part of our strategy. We're buying PeopleSoft, we're buying all these software companies, and Oracle is becoming this behemoth of an organization. I'm an executive there. I'm helping to set strategy. I have this kind of a big, important, hard job. I'm very well paid. And, for many people, this was a dream job, and I left, and people are like, why would you leave? And, I had a lot of influence in this job. And the simple answer is, I felt like I was finally good at this, and it wasn't.
You wanted to grow.
Yeah, I was so used to stretching and reaching, and that growth that comes from, sort of that steep learning curve. And so I left really in search of something that I was interested in, but also didn't fully know how to do. And it's how I ended up becoming a researcher. And, I felt like I knew just enough to get started, but not enough to be really good at what I do. And and so that's kind of the learning curve I've been on.
Amazing. And so you begin your firm, and essentially this group takes on some very high profile clients. You had everyone from Apple and AT&T and Disney and Nike and Salesforce and Tesla and Twitter. I mean, these are some of those household names and brands and logos and icons in our culture. What was that like for you, and how did you start it? Share us a little bit of that journey. That's so exciting.
Well, this isn't false humility. I think this is accurate. This was kind of a zip code issue. In many ways, it was a function of where I live. I had come out of tech. I live right in the heart of Silicon Valley, and sort of right in the heart of tech and, venture capital. And so these were the companies that I was surrounded by. So it's not like I went out gee, how do I get Apple as a client? Apple just came knocking. And I think SAP was, Apple and SAP were my two first big clients. And then once you do a good job in one place, then other companies. And so I think I just got swept into sort of the virality of networking and executives. And I started doing executive coaching, and there's probably no more inner circle, self-referencing, supporting network than executives. And they're like, hey, here's what I'm struggling with. And here's what's helping me. Do you need this? And so I found myself just working with a lot of really high profile and interesting executives. I, was very fortunate. I got to do work for Tim Cook and coach a number of executives on his executive team. And, I just one thing leads to the other. And I don't know that I have spent a lot of time making that happen. I think I've just tried to really create value for everyone I work for. And then the rest just, I don't know, takes care of itself. That sounds really lazy, doesn't it?
No, it doesn't. I think you're incredibly humble. I think I find it infectious, and how fun to be coaching some of these true titans of industry. You've written several books. One is called Multipliers: How the Best Leaders Make Everyone Smarter. And you've had several best-selling books as well. So that was a New York Times bestseller. Of all the books you've written, which do you have a favorite? Do you have a favorite child of, of literary works? And which one would you recommend, like our listeners, if you're like, hey, if you really want to get a sense of my body of work, like read this book?
Well, Multipliers is the book that has been most widely read. I think, there's been like a million people who have read that book. I thought that maybe, I don't know, I figured my mom would buy a couple copies of it. And I figured some of these executives I had coached would, buy a few copies out of obligation. But, it was sort of this surprise bestseller book. I think it surprised me. I think it surprised the publisher. And I guess maybe this isn't so humbly put, but it's what I hear is the book kind of changed the narrative about leadership. And I think that really has. When I, talk to people around the world, they say, wow, that book kind of ushered in a new era of leadership and thinking about leadership, in many ways redefined leadership. I remember one of the endorsements when the book came out, when these professors, they called it a subversive book.
Oh.
And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Like, I like that, because the premise of it, and it really came out of my experience at Oracle and coaching executives at Apple and SAP and, these companies that hire really, really sharp, smart, driven kinds of leaders. And what I began to notice, and this really came from my time at Oracle, is that there are a lot of really, really smart people that when they're put into management positions, they don't always have infectious intelligence. Like, in many ways, some of the smartest individuals can have this dampering or diminishing effect on the intelligence and capability of other people. And, I the name I gave for this type of leader was a diminisher. Like, they're smart, but people around them don't get to be as smart as they could be or should be and want to be. And then I noticed another type of leader, people like Tim Cook, who are absolutely brilliant, but they're kind of genius makers, not just geniuses, that people are at their best around. I loved hearing how people talked about preparing to go meet with Tim. They're like, oh, you don't just show up to a meeting with him. Like, you show up smart. I expected Tim to be really scary when I first met him. When I went for my first one-on-one meeting with Tim, I went with sort of body armor on, emotionally thinking, okay, he's probably going to be a bit of a jerk, as so many executives are. And I found him to be so inviting and so caring and so interested. I went there interested in what he had to say. And at the end of our conversation, most of it was him being interested in what I could teach him and share with him. And he's picking my brain for insights. I was like, wow, I really expected that to go a very different kind of way. And I left entirely charmed by him. And I love that feeling of when I am so charmed by leaders, not manipulated by, but where there's this saying, it was actually something I read in this tribute. Bono, the rock star, wrote about George Clooney. So Bono is writing a tribute to him, and this is the Time magazine's 100 Most Influential People issue. And he was trying to describe the essence of George Clooney, who he was as an actor, an artist, and an activist. And he compared him to these two British prime ministers from the 1800s. And let me see if I can get this right. He said, it's been said that after meeting with the great British Prime Minister William Ewart Gladstone, you left feeling he was the smartest person in the world. But after meeting with his rival, Benjamin Disraeli, you left thinking you were the smartest person. And that was like the dynamic I saw with certain leaders is like you walk out of their office feeling smart, not just feeling seen and heard, but feeling capable, feeling entrusted, feeling powerful. Not like, gee, I got to go meet with someone who's powerful, but that you walk out with a remit and you're like, wow, I just was interested. That's how I felt at Oracle. I'm like, man, I can't believe they're giving me this level of responsibility. It's kind of like when someone gives you a massive infusion of capital and you're like, wow, like I feel that kind of high expectation, the power. And so I started to be really interested in leaders who other people are at their best around. Other people are really smart and really capable and operate with accountability and ownership and grow. And that's really the question I studied was, why is it that we some leaders seem to amplify intelligence and others drain it from organizations? And I found that these diminishing leaders were getting less than half of people's available intelligence. And not only do they get more from people, these multiplier leaders, they create a very different kind of work experience. So that was the beginning of my research work. And I guess what I found is kind of like all my other experience. If you do a good job on one piece of work, you're often given another piece of work and often a bigger piece of work. And it's put me down the research, write, teach, repeat cycle, which kind of keeps me a lot underqualified.
Oh, Liz, you just, like I said, you're self-effacing style. So, and I think you're sincere. I just think it's
very sincere.
It's very endearing. It makes me just delight that you, because I know that, yes, it probably helped that you were in the zip code, as you said, in proximity. And it probably helped that you'd been given some incredible opportunities that maybe your experience didn't warrant, but clearly you seized those opportunities. I mean, there's Tony Hsieh at Zappos, the former CEO and founder of Zappos, who I had the privilege of knowing and spending some time with. He shared the research that Zappos did actually on companies that quote unquote had luck and those who didn't. And actually what they saw is in the companies that consider themselves that were unsuccessful, they went back and looked at a lot of the companies that called themselves unlucky, and they could actually demarcate that they had the same amount of luck opportunities and disadvantaged opportunities as the companies that consider themselves lucky. The difference is one actually seized those opportunities and were more opportunistic and ready and executed upon those lucky moments. And so it's what you kind of hope. You hope that it's not just a game of crapshoot that what we get. You hope that that there's some of our will and our might and our preparedness and our execution that can change the fate of our careers.
Oh, absolutely. And, I don't diminish the fact that there was something that I was doing that was earning those opportunities and delivering on that, and it actually makes me think of like one of the things I learned in the research for a more recent book, my most recent book, Impact Players. And we're, in that book, I'm trying to understand why are some people like working hard and other people who are working no harder are having such tremendous impact in their work. And if I had to boil that body of research and like the 90,000 words that are in that book down to us, maybe one of the simple single ideas is that they handle ambiguity and uncertainty differently and better than other people. And it is one of the things that I think I learned along the way is the most valuable and impactful work tends to sit on the outer edge of what companies know how to do and on the outer edge of what we know how to do. And it tends to sit in this liminal, messy space.
Right.
An opportunity is given to people who say, I'll do that.
I believe I have
Like,
faith.
like that's ill-defined, that's messy, it's ugly, it's fraught with, uncertainty, but make I'll like make something out of that. And, I think that's the mentality that I moved through this work through, which is like, okay, that's messy. And like, I'll do that. And I don't think it's because I love messy so much. I actually really dislike messy. I was just giving my son, my adult son who lives with me, a little tutorial about what's messy and what's not messy. I don't like messy. I like making sense of it. And I think the more we can go into these ill-defined spaces and make sense of them, I think it's a tremendous, like we create tremendous value. We have greater impact. I think it's what great entrepreneurs do as well. They take in that stuff that like no one kind of wants to deal with that because that's a messy problem. And they're like, I can define that and create something there.
That's great, Liz. So I've got you captive. You have coached these incredible leaders, and I have a personal question for you. So, like, I'm right now I'm building a startup company, and it's a nonprofit. It's the first of its kind, like 501c3 film fund where people can donate philanthropic dollars, and then our fund will invest in for-profit feature and television film, scripted film. And in the past, people have leveraged philanthropic dollars to make documentaries, but this is an idea as time has come to do it for the films that are like where everyone's getting paid and paid a lot. Like, so like imagine, the movie Taken or Blood Diamond or Schindler's List or Aaron Brockovich, these films, they did more than all the documentaries combined on their different issues. And the idea is to basically have ultra high net worth family foundations and offices and major manufacturers be able to underwrite content that actually has the bigger impact. And the idea is challenging that it doesn't mean everybody has to not make money. It's about what's the greatest levers we can in society to drive awareness, commercial viability, reach, all of that. And I think stories are the most powerful things we do. I'm sure all of your books have incredible stories and examples, not just stats and not just platitudes. It's like you have to give stories to actually cement into people's brains how to behave or how our ways of being as leaders are different. And so what's interesting is we're in like startup mode. So you've got like a lot of like people that are incentivized on performance based in the beginning, and it's a nonprofit. So you're also trying to get people based on their, on volunteerism. So they all have like their day jobs and it's like a secondary thing. It's a secondary place to toil. What have you seen from leaders in positions like that when they don't have like that intrinsic, like your salary depends on it, you could lose your job, but rather have you seen good leaders? What have you seen the tools and tricks are in your books or your research to get as a leader multipliers in like commission-based sales or incentivizing people that's based on performance? Like, what do you have any good tips or tricks or insights that you've noticed?
Well, I'm going to give you, I guess, maybe 2.5 words. And it took me a few years to figure out these 2.5 words. But what I find the best leaders do, and kind of if I could sum up a lot of what I learned in multipliers and what the best leaders do, is they create two coexisting conditions. One is safety, physical safety, psychological safety, intellectual safety, kind of like social safety, like where people feel like they belong and they can speak up and speak truth to power, that they, that they can make a mistake and own that and not, be penalized for a reasonable mistake. So like safety, that's one. And that's the half word, stretch. And the stretch is high expectations, holding people accountable, big aspirations, very candid feedback. And what happens is when these two things come together, people tend to perform at their best. Like if you want high performance, see, a lot of managers mistakenly go straight for that. But like, what's it like to work for a boss who's like all stretch, but no safety.
No, not fun. I've had that before. It's not fun.
Yeah. Yeah, no, we kind of freeze up and we end up, sort of shying away from things, shut it down. We're like all about risk mitigation. Um, but then if you look at the other side of the pendulum, like what's it like to work for a boss who's all safety? They love you up, they appreciate you, they tell you how important and how smart you are, but there's no stretch. It's kind of why I ended up leaving Oracle, not because it was a great company. It's just like I felt too comfortable. And, that's also doesn't lead to high performance. Like we don't tend to perform just because we're in a wonderful environment. I think we all have a lazy gene and, without something compelling and pushing us, I think we settle for comfort a lot of times. But when leaders bring these two forces together, that's when magic starts to happen. And like, if you want early stage, high performance, it's like safety. Like I in some ways, the way I like to look at it is it's an order of operations issue, like a math problem. You get the safety first, and then you've earned the right to ask people, for their best thinking, to send something back and go, it's not there. Like the script, it's not good enough. And, I just had a very, very close colleague, share with me like the first manuscript of his book, something he had worked on for more than a year, 2 years. And I had to send it back and say, you're not there.
It's not good enough.
It's not. And but this was based on years of working together. And, and I remember, one of the things I said in this is I'm like, you and I are 100%. Like, so it's like our relationship, like, I think, so highly of you, so highly of your capability, like relationship is 100% solid because I need to tell you this hard thing.
Yes.
That might be difficult to hear, but like when you get that safety built, you've kind of earned the right to say, we're not there.
No. Yes.
It's good enough. And, Pixar is such a great example of an organization. I loved the book Creativity, Ed Catmull's book, Creativity Inc. I'm like, man, he did what took me Multipliers and my book, Rookie Smarts. Like he did that in one book, where like the messages, it took me 2 books to do. But I think that's a great example of a culture that has built like all of that collaboration and safety and all those mechanisms, but then say like, we're not releasing it until it's good. If you don't have the emotional narrative arc that Pixar is known for, it's a no. Like if it's not passing all of our standards and our tests, back.
Yeah.
Or scrap.
I love that. So safety plus stretching. And in terms of like, so have you ever, with all of it, you had some big names as clients, and with Wiseman Group, is it still continuing? You're still doing that research and consulting still to this day?
Oh, absolutely.
So, do you ever work with smaller groups? Like, do you find you work with startups? Do people bring you on early, or is it generally like multinational, these big blue chip companies that you're predominantly working with?
Predominantly it's larger, like large cap companies, Fortune 500, Fortune 1000 companies, but it runs the full gamut. And, we're sometimes working with very small companies who are in the startup mode and they're trying to figure out how to scale. They're often, venture backed firms. But it's one of the thrills of my work is that I've been able to coach and teach, groups of superintendents, city managers, nonprofits, for-profits, big, little, well-run, poorly run. Yeah.
That's amazing. So you've had just the whole gamut of size of leaders and shapes. Can you share an example of a leader who successfully transformed from an accidental diminisher to a multiplier? Like, do you have anybody that maybe you don't need to say their name, but maybe explain like what you saw change in them from your consulting? Or
man, there's so many. Maybe for fun, I'll pick the first and the most recent.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah. So the Multipliers book came out, and then it was like, surprised me. It was a Wall Street Journal bestseller, and I had been on NPR Morning Edition show, which goes out to gazillion million people, and so a lot of people ran out and bought the book, and there was this one particular person who heard me on NPR on Renee Montaigne's show, and got the book, and then sent a message. It was almost like, it was so cryptic. It was interesting. It was a message that came into the website, and it just said, accidental diminisher seeking reform and recovery. And then he just left his phone number. And I'm like,
How
ooh.
adorable.
It was so adorable. And I guess I should back up that one of the big surprises of this research was not just that these multiplier leaders were getting so much more from people. It was the fact that so much of our diminishing that's happening in our organizations is coming from really well-intended managers, like good people trying to be good leaders, doing what they think is like really good leadership stuff. Like, okay, I'm going to be inspiring. I'm going to like be a fountain of ideas. I'm going to be supportive and helpful. I'm going to have like really high standards. Like they do things that look like really good leadership on the surface, but it actually has deeply diminishing effect. Like one of those would be what I call the rescuer, who really cares about people. And when they see people struggling with a big task, I don't know, their heart beats a little faster, and they like say, oh man, that person's struggling. Let me jump in and offer support and help. And, it's kind of like, I guess, the classic, open up the chrysalis, the butterfly, before it's ready. It's like, it ends up just stunting growth in other people that, they're carried across the finish line by their bosses, which means the boss is doing the learning, the boss is getting the credit. Meanwhile, they start to languish, and end up helpless and immune. Okay, so that's what his concept was, accidental diminisher. That's what he wrote to me. And this was someone, I remember talking to him, and I don't know if I would say he was an accidental diminisher as much as he was a habitual diminisher. And he said, all of my role models have been diminishing. Like all of my bosses were tyrannical, know-it-alls, micromanager. My programming at home from an early age this is like all I've really seen. And this person, bless him, and this person had started a company. It was now a global services firm. And he saw in himself this diminishing effect. And he's like, can you help me? And I'm like, I don't know, but let's give this a try. And, I watched as he kind of pushed through this, and it was a reshaping of him as a leader. And it was hard work, because all of his programming told him to do something very different. And I saw him change.
Wow.
Yeah, it was wonderful to watch. And it was one of those hard won victories. This was not easy. Okay, so that might have been the first transformation I've seen. I've seen, I don't know, hundreds, thousands. I hear from people all around the world who said, like, this book changed my life. It changed me. It changed. Yeah, there's too many to count. But like, here's just the recent one. This was just a few days ago. I heard from this, it's one who's, I think she's the director of nursing at the Mayo Clinic, but I might have that wrong in terms of her exact job, but I know it involves like an executive role in nursing, and I know it's at the Mayo Clinic. And she's like, oh yeah, and I think for her, she was already a really pretty good leader, but this idea of the accidental diminisher, she's like, oh yeah, I think there's some things I'm over efforting. Maybe I should do a little bit less and let my team do a little bit more. And she rattled off, I ask more question now. I play fewer chips. It's one of the ideas in the book is, to take up a little bit less real estate in a meeting, and to, kind of go into meeting with like I don't know, you put a set of poker chips in your pocket or a set of quarters. She said what she does. I love this. She says, when I start a meeting, because she's full of ideas. She's, really, really smart, well educated, well trained. She said, I don't know how many, but I'm going to assume it's like 4 mints in my pocket. And she said, every time I make a comment, I put a mint in my mouth and I'm like using one of my chips. And what's so brilliant about this is when she pops a mint in her mouth, it's a chance for her to like ask a question, make a comment, offer a challenge, and then to roll back and go quiet. We find that the best leaders, they know when to be big, but they also know how to play small and create room for other people to be big. Tim Cook is a lovely, lovely example of this. Like, he knows how to show up big when he needs to, but he also knows when to sit back and listen and say, tell me what's going on here. What do I need to know that I don't understand? How can you help me understand something? And she just rattled off a number of things she did. And then here was the thing that I just thought was so fun. She's like really put her team in charge. Instead of her taking ownership, she's like, you're in charge of this, you're in charge of that. And her team was working on some problem solving. And she said, oh, you know what? Maybe I shouldn't even like go to the meeting. Let me give you space and let you all figure that out. And then she said, their response was like, yeah, we can handle this, but we actually want you here. Like, we'll work this out. And then would you like come towards the end of the meeting? Because we want to tell you like how we want to solve this problem. And so, Lindsay, so many people want their bosses out of their business, out of their face, out of their knickers. It's like, man, I've got this hovering boss. I don't feel trusted. I just want them out. And here is a team that's so well led that they want their boss in, not because they want to be told what to do. It's like, we just kind of like, we're putting on a show here, and we want like our parents and our,
to come watch me, mom. Yeah.
Watch me, mom. And that's what good leadership looks like, is when the team is capable. And in some ways, and I think they said like, oh, we don't need you in this meeting, but we want you.
Wow.
We want you.
That's so beautiful. I loved this idea of the chips, or I'm going to read your books. I wish I had ahead of this, Liz. It's an epic fail for me as a podcast interviewer, but I would love to know, what are some other concrete examples of that? So, taking less real estate in meetings. What are some other concrete utility examples to make sure you're not a diminisher?
Here's one of my favorites. This is such a universal thing, is I call it the extreme question challenge. And, it's based on this principle that, in an environment where there's a lot of change, a lot of uncertainty, things are moving fast, it's really hard for the leader to have the answers. And the best leaders tend to ask the right questions, not just tons of questions, that's sort of interrogation, but they ask really insightful, interesting questions, and they let other people find the answers to those questions. They get their team learning and performing and taking ownership. And one sort of experiment or practice to, ask better questions is to take what I call the extreme question challenge, which very much starts as a quantity game. And the challenge is, can you go into a meeting and just ask questions? And if someone's going to take this challenge, I'm not suggesting someone operate permanently like that. That would be, more than awkward, maybe even a bit creepy. But like, the dare is to try it once or twice and see what happens. To just go in with no opinions. Like, the opinions are sort of carried by your questions. Like, so how are we doing on budget? Where are we overspent? Where are we underspent? A movie like this, what might be a typical budget? Like, where are you concerned that we're not getting value? Like, obviously, as a leader, you're carrying into that conversation a concern about budget, or that you're not spending enough, but you're asking the questions and letting the team weigh in. So that's something else you might do. Another thing for leaders who are looking for more innovation, bigger, bolder thinking, I like to separate the freeways from the playgrounds. A lot of leaders, I zip code advantaged or disadvantaged depending on the way you look at it. I live right in the heart of Silicon Valley, and I can't tell you how tired I am of hearing people say, "Hey, fail fast, fail forward," just like, fail and learn. It's not a great business strategy, actually. And, it's actually a very confusing one because the inexperienced people just tend to fail. And then the experienced people are like, you don't really mean that. I remember early days at Oracle where, it was sort of legend, the support person, when, the guy's database went down, he's like, "Well, bummer, dude, let me see what we can do." It's like, bummer, dude, is not a really good response when someone's production database just went down. Like, there are things that have to run right and run well. And then I like to call those the freeways. And in any operation, whether you are literally operating on human beings in the OR or running customer support in a consumer packaged goods company, there are things that have to be done just exactly right. Those are the freeways. A little mistake can be very, very costly or deadly to a business or a career. And then there are parts of the work that are playgrounds where you can make a mistake, you can recover. And, if leaders want bolder thinking, instead of just saying, "Hey, fail, experiment, try, go big," it's like, okay, here are the parts where I still don't want you to go big. Like, this is where we tighten up and get it right. And over here, these are your playgrounds. This is where you go big. And creating that separation is incredibly empowering for people. Maybe another thing, this is a metaphor I really love from one of the people I interviewed for the book, Jay Choi, is Korean. He ran McKinsey, the McKinsey consulting firm in Korea. He was the managing director and such a multiplier leader. And he's a leader I particularly like. I hired him out of Stanford into Oracle. And so I have followed his career. He's an amazing leader, always has been. He said, "Liz, sometimes you have to rescue people. And, when people are struggling, it's irresponsible not to step in and offer some help." And he said, "But you have to remember to hand the pen back." I'm like, "Well, what do you mean by that?" And he described the scenario where it was 2:00 in the morning because this project team had a big presentation to their largest Pan-Asian client. So it's a huge client for McKinsey. And they've been doing this business transformation study, and there's sort of a lot at stake. They've done the first part, but of course they want to win the business for the bigger part of the study. The team is trying to prepare this presentation, and they're, working late into the night. It's the next day and they're stuck. And Jay is the executive sponsor. He's not the project leader, but he's in the back of the room. He's watching and he sees the team struggle. And finally they're like, "Hey, Jay, kind of what do you got for us?" And, they hand him the whiteboard marker, and he can see exactly what needs to happen. Like, he sees the pitch, and he's going up, and, you're in the film industry, like the value when someone can like storyboard that, like the narrative arc of something. And so he goes up and he's starting to like lay out the storyboard. Okay, well, here's kind of the problem, and here's the data, and here are the themes. And he's laying this out, and it's 2 a.m. and they're all stuck. And you can imagine what the group is thinking, like, finish the job. Like, just tell us what to do. Lay this out for us. And the multiplier in him, I think, just signals restraint. He stops kind of midway through his thinking, and he says, "Here are a few ideas to get you unstuck. Why don't you take it from here and see what you can do with this?" And he hands the pen back to the project leader. It's become one of my favorite metaphors for good leadership. Is like, the job of a leader is to give other people ownership, to like hand the pen, the power of the pen, to other people. But every time we help, it's like, if someone hands you when you're helping, it's like you've taken that ownership from them. It's now yours. And you can offer a little bit of help, but then hand the pen back. So it's like when the practice is when people around you are struggling, Like, can you offer the smallest amount of help to get someone unstuck and then hand the ownership, the pen, back to them?
That's good. That's really good. I love these. These are great. Like, again, story form is so important. So as you've written other books and as time has gone on in your leadership development consulting work, what has, I guess, evolved about your ideas about leadership since you wrote Multiplier? Like, what are some other things that you're like, well, actually, when I wrote that book, now I understand this more fully, or there's this other ideated perspective that I have, or is there anything about it that you've kind of not jettisoned, but like
Oh,
evolved
yeah.
out of?
Oh, yeah. There's things that I've gotten wrong that I've learned, but I tell you the thing that I've probably gotten most wrong and evolved my thinking is I used to think being a good leader was about behavior and skills. And so like the way to be, because, I used to run the university for Oracle and talent development. So it was all about like teaching and the right skills. And I really come to see that that's necessary, but really not, it's not where the real growth comes from. And what I have learned, and maybe I'll start particularly with multiplier since we've been talking about those ideas, is that it's not about trying to be a multiplier as much as it is about letting everyone know what your diminishing tendencies are and your
Wow.
Yeah, it's about
So like kind of opening the kimono and being like, I struggle here. I'm just going to be straight up about it. This is my weakness.
Straight up. And it's not like, gee, I'm a tyrannical, bossy know-it-all. It's I have rescuer tendencies. Like, I don't like to see people struggle. And so I'm usually quick to step in and help. And like, if you give me the pen, I'm going to take it and I'm going to help you. So I have to like remember to hand the pen back to people. Or, hey, I've got rescuer tendencies. So if I offer you a hand to help at the 11th hour, feel free to say no. Like, hey, boss, I got this. Like, I don't need your help. I'm one of my accidental diminisher tendencies. I'm a fountain of ideas, and I'm constantly like, hey, maybe we should try this. Well, maybe we should do this. And everyone on my team knows this about me. And so people feel very, very empowered to say, Liz, when I'm spouting out like, hey, maybe we should do a research project on this. And maybe we should, like, do you actually want us to stop what we're working on and do that? Or are you having an idea party right now? It's totally an idea party. Like, ignore me. And what I've learned,
Ignore me.
I actually had I wrote about this in the book. I wrote about it like some corporate manager did this. Like my friends all know this was me, but I had written in whiteboard and with dry erase pen. I wrote in big block letters as when I was at Oracle. I'm like, ignore me as needed to get your job done. Because I was this like overwhelming force. Like people would come into my office and be like, hey, Liz, that project, we got the green light on it. We'll go here. We're able to get the server space and we're like moving forward. And I'd be like, oh, that's interesting. Maybe we could expand that. Or like, maybe we should do this. Maybe we should do that. And people would come in excited and leave totally glazed as to like, what just happened? And so I had to learn to say like, no, you know what's important. I also had written on my door, here are our top 3 priorities. And so like, to not let me distract you from crossing the finish line. Like, and I've learned to say things like, these are soft opinions versus hard opinions, and which is another one of my favorite practices. But I guess I've learned that we don't have to work so hard to be good leaders. Like if we open the kimono and just tell people like what our vulnerabilities are, it's not vulnerability for the sake of it. It's just saying, because what happens is people then can stop you in real time.
They're like,
they
hey,
know you're doing it with the best of intentions, not because you doubt them.
yeah, that's good, Liz. These are beautiful insights. I'm so grateful for your insights and your articulation, and you are so, like I said, just it's delicious to listen to you because you do it with zero ego and self-interest. You're so other-centric in your speech and your posture in the world. It's really cool to meet you. Kind of wrapping up here, we're coming up at the top of the hour. Like, what are you most excited about you're working on now? Like, I mean, you wrote that beautiful book, Rookie Smarts, and you talk about how there's an advantage to the beginner mindset. What are you currently in a beginner mindset about? Or what is something that you're like, hey, kind of obsessed. I'm in this new learning. I'm in a love affair with this new Twitter pated experience, whatever I'm having.
Oh, for me, they're not love affairs. They're loathing. It's horrible. It's awful. But and listen, here's my new project. This is my current research, and I know I'm serious when I create a binder. But what I'm looking at is, it's kind of like how leaders are made, and what I'm really trying to understand, and the reason why it's hard, it's a very complex piece of research, is trying to understand what are the formative experiences and people that end up shaping us as leaders. And looking at, in some ways, like what causes people to end up being really good leaders or really bad leaders. Like, why do we sometimes show up into the workplace with assumptions that lead to really high impact versus other people who are really stuck in boxes? And I'm trying to figure out, like, where did that come from? And what caused some people, Tim Cook will be one of the people I look at. What caused him to end up leading the way he did? Was it luck, or did he end up having the right kinds of experiences in the right stages and phases? And, some of our workplace experiences lead to trauma that cause some people to just like, I can't go there. That's too scary. I got my hands, I touched that stove once and I'll never touch that again. And other people are like, boom, let me at it. Some of that is probably how we were raised, where we were raised, by whom we were raised. But I think a lot of it is a factor of our early workplace experiences and what those teach us and how those can either trap us or liberate us. So that's what I'm working on, and it's hard. And I don't know what I'm doing. So I am kind of at that bottom of that learning curve, but I'll figure this out.
That's amazing. I'm just so thrilled to have met you, and so grateful that you shared some of these great insights. I think our listeners, many of them are business leaders, and if not, we all have leadership moments in our life, whether as a parent, as a friend, in a group. I mean, right? Our volunteer organizations, our churches, wherever they may be, we all have opportunities to be either diminishing or magnifying type people. And I truly appreciate being a multiplier is such a gift, because I know those who've been multipliers in my life, they've multiplied the goodness in me, literally. And then I just want to go multiply. It's like a virtuous cycle, like this generosity of spirit and this exuding and believing in the best in others, and then extrapolating out the best in others, just kind of has this virtuous cycle. So thank you for being that kind of person, and your great leadership and your time on our podcast, Liz. Thanks again.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
Do you need help with the next steps for your financial plan? Think Capita. Capita is a financial network built around you. They have a team of financial advisors, CPAs, estate attorneys, Medicare providers, and Social Security experts to help you accomplish your financial goals. Call to schedule a complimentary consultation at 801-566-5058 or visit their website at www.capitafinancialnetwork.com. You can also check out their financial education podcast, The Financial Call, available on Apple, Google, Spotify, and YouTube.